Champions Trophy squads, test tours, and T20 leagues galore. There is absolutely loads going on in the world of cricket at the moment, so let's try and cover as much as possible from the past week. Let's start with the Champions Trophy, which gets underway in just over a month. We've seen squads filtering through, and there have been some big calls made. England revealed their squad before Christmas with no real surprises, and at the time of recording, we're still waiting on India and Pakistan, but the other 5 teams have announced their 15s. There's been a lot of talk about Afghanistan over the last week from a non-cricketing sense, but more about that later. Ibrahim Zadran is fit again to partner Ramanul Gurbaz at the top of the order, which is absolutely huge. 18-year-old Ala Ghazanfar is included, with Majib Ur-Rahman unavailable for selection, and Sedikul Aratal is in after positive displays against Zimbabwe and in the emerging teams Asia Cup. Australia's squad includes Pat Cummins and Josh Hazlewood, despite the pair being ruled out of another tour that we'll discuss in a bit. Nathan Ellis has won the race to be the 4th seamer behind those two and Mitchell Starc, while Adam Zampa is the lone spinner with support from Glenn Maxwell and Matt Short, who's continued to impress in the Big Bash. The rest of it, as you'd expect really, though no room for Jake Fraser-McGurk after low scores in his opportunities against Pakistan and a disappointing Big Bash. Before we continue, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with all our latest videos and podcast episodes. And if you want even more from Wisden, head over to our Patreon channel for extra bonus content starting from just £5 a month. Bangladesh have left both Liton Das and Shakib Al Hassan out of their 15-strong squad. Liton hasn't made a half-century since the ODI World Cup in October 2023 and has been dismissed for 6 single-digit scores in his last 7 ODI knocks. Meanwhile, Shakib's exclusion follows a second failed independent assessment of his bowling action, which has led to his suspension from bowling in top-flight cricket and likely spells the end of his ODI career. There were reports that Tamim Iqbal had been asked to consider a return for the Champions Trophy, but he this week announced his international retirement for a 2nd time. Although the last time he retired, that lasted about 24 hours, so who knows. New Zealand's group is packed full of fast bowling talent, with youngsters Ben Sears and Will O'Rourke supporting the experienced Lockie Ferguson. They've got spin covered too, while the batting stocks look very familiar. And lastly, South Africa, who've welcomed back Lungi Ngidi and Anric Nortje from injury. They've both been picked over Gerald Coetzee, South Africa's leading wicket taker at the 2023 ODI World Cup, who coach Rob Walter admitted had ultimately done nothing wrong to not be selected. Staying on the Champions Trophy briefly, the ECB has rejected calls to boycott England's game against Afghanistan in protest over the oppression of women and girls' rights in the country. Urged by more than 160 UK politicians to pull out of the contest, ECB Chief Executive Richard Gould responded by saying the board would rather take a unified stance with the ICC than act alone. Women in Afghanistan have been effectively banned from taking part in organised sport since the Taliban returned to power in 2021, and nations have faced repeated calls to boycott Afghanistan's men's team since. Cricket Australia indefinitely postponed a bilateral T20I series in March 2024, but have continued to play them in ICC tournaments, a stance which the ECB also adheres to. South Africa's Sports Minister Gayton McKenzie has also voiced his concerns, likening the Taliban's regime to apartheid South Africa. If it was my decision, then it certainly would not happen, he said. As a man who comes from a race that was not allowed equal access to sporting opportunities during apartheid, it would be hypocritical and immoral to look the other way today when the same is being done towards women anywhere in the world. That story will continue to develop as the tournament draws closer, I'm sure. More squad news, and Australia have announced a 16-strong group for their test tour of Sri Lanka. Now, barring disastrous penalty points for slow over rates, they have of course already qualified for the World Test Championship final at Lords. Pat Cummins will miss the series for the birth of his 2nd child, and Josh Hazlewood misses out to recover from a calf injury. Steve Smith will captain the side in Pat Cummins' absence. Sam Constas has been retained, and Nathan McSweeney, discarded midway through the Border Gavaskar Trophy, is back. Australia could set up in any number of ways really, with Usman Khawaja also in the squad and whispers about promoting Travis Head to open. There's no Mitch Marsh, and talks of a return for Glenn Maxwell haven't materialised, but 21-year-old Cooper Connolly is an interesting inclusion. He boasts a strong first-class batting record, albeit from 4 matches, and is enjoying an excellent Big Bash campaign for a struggling Perth Scorchers. But his selection is as much about his batting as it is what his left-arm spin could offer in Sri Lankan conditions, despite not taking a wicket in any of his international or first-class appearances so far. Maybe a first, definitely one to keep an eye on. Elsewhere in Australia, they're hopeful to have Cameron Green fit as a batter at the very least for the World Test Championship final, and Jhye Richardson's rotten luck with injuries continues, ending his summer early for more shoulder surgery. Jasprit Bumrah looks set to miss the Champions Trophy following his injury in the 5th Test against Australia, but India have at least been given a boost with the return of Mohammed Shami. After a succession of injuries, he's in their T20I squad to face England later this month, having last played for India in the 2023 ODI World Cup final. Our last bit of team news concerns Pakistan, who've released a spin-heavy test squad to host the West Indies. Spin twins Sajid Khan and Norman Ali are reunited, ready to cause carnage again after their exploits against England. Mohammed Abbas and Naseem Shah have been rested, and there was no mention at all of Shaheen Afridi in the press release. Abdullah Shafiq's poor form and Saim Ayub's unfortunate injury means stalwart Imam Ul-Haq and 22-year-old Mohamed Herrera have been drafted in at the top of the order. In addition to Tamim Iqbal, we've seen a couple of other retirements this week. New Zealand's Martin Guptill formally announced his international retirement, finishing with more than 13,000 international runs, and India's Varun Aaron has stepped back from all representative cricket at the age of 35. But one man who's not showing signs of slowing down is James Anderson. He signed a one-year deal with Lancashire to play in the 2025 County Championship and T20 Blast, which would extend his playing career beyond his 43rd birthday. Staying with England briefly, Ben Stokes has started his rehab, with the England captain having undergone hamstring surgery, and Archie Vaughan, Michael Vaughan's son, will lead the under-19s in South Africa. The women's Ashes are underway, and it was Australia who won the first game by 4 wickets at North Sydney Oval. Ash Gardner was a star with 42 and 3 for 19, while Alyssa Healy made 70 as she continues her return from injury. Kate Cross was absent for England, having not fully recovered from back spasms suffered against South Africa in December. India's women have also been in action and are currently 2-0 up in an ODI series against Ireland. Jemima Rodriguez's first ODI ton helped them post their highest ever score, 370 for 5, while Smriti Mandana became the third fastest to 4,000 runs in women's ODIs. Over in the Big Bash, we've entered the last week of the group stages. Melbourne Stars have won 4 in a row after losing their first 5, and the last one was all thanks to Glenn Maxwell. Arriving at the crease with his side 45 for 4 in the Melbourne Derby, Maxwell struck 90 off 52 balls with 10 sixes. His knock included an 81-run partnership for the 8th wicket with Osama Mir, in which Maxwell scored 79 and Mir 0. Steve Smith made a brilliant 121 not out on his return to T20 action for the Sydney Sixers, while Sydney Thunder's David Warner is the competition's leading run scorer. Those two sides are level at the top, along with Hobart Hurricanes, for whom Tim David has been in devastating form recently. From Australia to South Africa, where the 3rd edition of the SA20 kicked off last week. There have been unbeaten 60s for Joe Root and Kane Williamson. Dewell Brevis lit up the opening night, and 2-time winners Sunrisers Eastern Cape are off to a tough start. But there are 3 main stories really. The first of which, Delano Potgieter's brilliant all-round contributions, taking 5 for 10 in the tournament opener and twice contributing as a finisher, smashing 25 not out and 44 not out at a strike rate of 200 plus. Secondly, the second game of the tournament saw an almighty choke from Pretoria Capitals against Durban's Supergiants. Chasing 210, Pretoria found themselves 168 for 1 after 13 overs thanks to a rapid start from Will Jacks and Ramanullah Gurbaz. But somehow 42 off 42 with 9 wickets remaining turned into 14 from the last over, 6 wickets down. Naveen Ul-Haq held his nerve for the Supergiants, who eked out a 2-run victory. But my favourite moment from the opening week was definitely Lhuan-dre Pretorius. Just 18 years old, he slammed a career best 97 off 51 on SA20 debut, striking 10 fours and 6 sixes. He was superb all around the ground and reminded me of a blend of Graham Smith and Quinton de Kock. Pretorius opened for South Africa at the most recent Under-19 World Cup, averaging 57.4, and made a century on first-class debut just before Christmas. A serious talent. And lastly, some quick-fire news to run through. There was a mad finish over in the Bangladesh Premier League where Nurul Hassan hit 30 off the last over as Rangpur Riders won a last-ball thriller, and an enormous 241-run opening partnership between Lytton Das and Tanzid Hassan, both of whom made hundreds. The ILT20 is also underway, with Dubai Capitals winning the opening game by 1 run, despite 61 from Nicholas Pooran and a Fazal Haq Faruqi Pfeiffer. 3 English players made 50s in Game 2, while Sharjah Warriors won off the last ball in Game 3, thanks to an unbeaten 83 not out from Tom Kohler-Cadmore. Karun Nair's outrageous Vijay Hazare Trophy form continued with a 4th List A century in a row. He scored 664 runs from 6 innings this season, including 5 centuries, and has only been dismissed once. His only innings without 100? 44 not out in a chase of 81. Crazy form. New Zealand beat Sri Lanka 2-1 in a pretty low-key ODI series, and finally Somerset have announced the signing of Matt Henry for the first half of the 2025 season, which is potentially huge for their county championship hopes. And that, I think, is just about everything for this week. I mean, I've probably missed something, but there is just so much happening. As always, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with any content requests for 2025. Catch you next week.